It's a little after 6 in the evening. A 51-year-old ER nurse walks into her own home after a long shift. And something is wrong. The lights are off, the curtains she opened that morning are shut tight. And then, a man steps out of the shadows of her bedroom. Yellow rubber gloves, a claw hammer in his fist. He swings for her head. She has never seen him before in her life. She has no idea who sent him. And in the next 14 minutes, this nurse is going to find out exactly what she's capable of, when the only way out is through him.
I'm Cole, and this is Midnight Files. September 6, 2006, Portland, Oregon. Susan Kuhnhausen is 51 years old, an emergency room nurse, 30 years on the job at Providence Portland Medical Center. She's seen it all: gunshot wounds, overdoses, patients coming off drugs, swinging at anyone close enough to hit. And like every nurse on her unit, she trains in self-defense. Because in the ER, you have to. That evening, she takes her time going home. She stops at a hair salon, jokes with her stylist that she needs a new color. She's in the middle of a divorce, and figures she's earned it. While she waits, she picks up a magazine and reads a poem about refusing to live in fear. She has no idea how soon those words are going to be tested. Around 6:30, she pulls up to her one-story house in southeast Portland, and the first thing she notices is that it's dark. She's pretty sure she opened those curtains this morning. They're closed now. She doesn't think much of it. She kicks off her shoes. She's done for the day. There's a note waiting for her, from her husband, Mike. They've been married almost 18 years, but he moved out about a year ago. He still has a key. He still knows the code to the alarm. The note says he hasn't been sleeping, that he had to get away, that he went to the beach. She heads toward her bedroom, and that's when a man steps out from behind the door. She's never seen him in her life. Yellow rubber gloves on his hands, a red and black claw hammer in his fist. Before she can even process it, he swings. He hits her in the head, hard. Now, most people, in that moment, run. Susan doesn't run. 30 years in the ER kicked in. She knew something her attacker didn't. If a man is swinging a weapon at you, the worst place to be is far away, where the swing has all its force. So she does the exact opposite of what he expects. She crowds him, she gets in close, and she fights him for the hammer. They go down. It becomes a brawl on the floor of her own home. He bites her, several times. She bites him right back, and not out of panic, on purpose. Because even now, some part of her is thinking like a nurse. If she doesn't make it out of this, she wants her teeth marks on his body. She wants them to be able to prove who did this. He hits her again, splits her lip, puts her flat on her back, and he's standing over her now, with that hammer. And she looks up, and she thinks, I'm going to die today. And then she makes a different decision. She decides to live. She gets back on him, climbs on top, uses her whole body weight to pin him down, and she wraps her arm around his throat, and she squeezes. And the entire time, she's screaming one question into his face: who sent you here? He never answers it. The only thing he says, the only words out of his mouth this whole time, are two: you're strong. And then, he stops moving. The whole fight lasted about 14 minutes. When it's over, Susan grabs the hammer and runs next door to her neighbor, Ann Mornick, and calls 911. She tells the dispatcher there's an intruder in the house next door, that he was in the bedroom with a hammer, and that the woman who lives there thinks she strangled him. They ask if Susan needs an ambulance. The answer comes back: no. Send it for the other guy. He may be dead. He was. Police find him face down in the hallway. Cause of death: strangulation. A 51-year-old nurse had choked the life out of a grown man with her bare hands. At first, it looks like a burglary gone wrong. But there's a problem with that theory. There's no sign of forced entry. Nobody kicked in a door. Nobody broke a window. Whoever this man was, he didn't break into that house. He was let in. Then they identify him: Edward Dalton Haffey, 59 years old. And he is no random burglar. Haffey had a long, violent history. He'd done serious prison time for robbery, for burglary, and, here's the chilling part, for conspiring to commit aggravated murder. In other words, this was not the first time Edward Haffey had been part of a plot to end someone's life. He had been here before, and the autopsy turns up one more thing: a heavy amount of cocaine in his system.
So now the question Susan screamed in his face becomes the question the detectives are asking too. Who sent him? The answer is in his backpack. He left it right there at the scene. Inside, a day planner, and scribbled on the week of September 4th, 2 days before the attack, 3 words: call Mike, get letter, and tucked into a folder, a cell phone number. The number belonged to Susan's husband, Mike. Because here's the thing about Mike. Susan didn't stumble into this marriage. Back in 1988, her mother and a friend placed a personal ad in the newspaper on her behalf. And out of everyone who answered it, one man stood out: Mike. They talked on the phone long before they ever met face to face. Not for an hour, not for one evening. By Susan's own count, more than 100 hours. She loved his voice. She loved that he wanted to talk about the deeper things. She fell for him one phone call at a time. And then she married him. For almost 18 years, that was the man she came home to. The man who answered her ad. The man who was supposed to know her better than anyone in the world. And now his phone number was sitting in a dead hitman's backpack. Here's how those 2 men knew each other. Both had served in Vietnam. They'd met through a veterans group. And Mike had actually gotten Haffey a job as a custodian at the adult video store where Mike worked. These weren't strangers passing in the night. Mike knew exactly who he was sending into his wife's home. And Susan told detectives what the evidence was already screaming. Her husband was the only other person alive who knew the code to her alarm. There was no forced entry, because the alarm was off. Police say Mike helped disarm it, and let Haffey in, and then Haffey waited, in the dark, for Susan to come home. The plan was cold and simple. Kill her. Make it look like a burglary. The reported price on her life, $50,000. And the motive wasn't rage. It wasn't another woman. It was the house. A home reported to be worth around $300,000. Mike had nowhere to live. And if Susan was dead, all of it would be his. That's what her life was worth to him. A roof. But here's what was happening while Susan lay in a hospital bed. The day after the attack, Mike walked into a pawn shop and bought a revolver. The day after that, he left a note at his father's house about how all he had ever wanted was to be loved, and how every time he found it, he destroyed it. And then he vanished. For days, nobody could find him. Police put out a bulletin. They finally tracked him down almost a week later in the parking garage of a medical center, where he claimed he was about to check himself in. He told the officers he had nothing left to live for. He wasn't grieving his wife. He was watching the walls close in. They put him on a psychiatric hold. And then they arrested him. He denied all of it, said he didn't even know Haffey. Held on $500,000 bail, charged with conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. But the evidence was the evidence. In the end, Mike Kuhnhausen pleaded guilty to soliciting the murder of his own wife. At his sentencing, Susan stood up and faced him. She held up photographs of her own bloodied, swollen face, the face he had paid a man to erase. He'd told police he was so relieved to hear she was okay. She looked right at him and asked him, "Do I look okay?" And then she said something people have never forgotten, that she was damaged by what he did to her. But I am not destroyed. Mike got 10 years. And here's the part that's almost impossible to imagine living with. Even with him locked up, Susan still couldn't feel safe. Because the man who wanted her dead was still breathing. And he'd already proven he would pay to make it happen. What if he found someone on the inside? What if he got out early? So she did everything she could. She changed her name back to Walters. She moved. She practiced at a shooting range. She built up the security around her. And she sued Mike for $1 million. Not for the money. To make sure he could never scrape together enough cash to hire anyone. Ever again. She lived under that shadow for years. It ended in 2014. Mike Kuhnhausen never walked out of prison. He died there, of cancer, about 3 months before his scheduled release. The man who hired someone to kill his wife never got the chance to try a second time. Susan Walters is alive today. She became an advocate for victims of violent crime. And she's been honest about what survival cost her. That taking a life, even the life of a man sent to take hers, is something she carries every single day, the way she put it. I've got a life sentence.
She came home from an ordinary shift. There was a stranger in her bedroom with a hammer. And the only reason we know her name at all is because she refused to die on her own hallway floor.